in recent years, it looks like the company was unprofitable and they were forced to sell through an OEB decision. And it looks like the reason they were so unprofitable is because they hired on so many consultants and management to run the company. Yeah.
Well, I can see that.
Anyone else on council want to speak to my comments or Councillor Beek's comments? Councilor McGuire, please.
Thank you, through the chair. I do think that this should be on the board. Unfortunately, right now it's on us, and I feel like if we just say, you know what, we don't want to deal with it, we're just going to give it to the board. We got into the situation ELK is in because no one was monitoring it. And I feel like if we aren't monitoring it and we just let the board do what they want and the shareholder just turns their eye and never asks for a shareholder meeting and never asks for an update, then shame on us. We already saw what happened if the shareholder stops paying attention. So I'm not in favor of it, but I'm one vote.
It says we purchased it for 13 million, but actual value at the time was 20 million. We sold it 17 years later for approximately the same price. We did not make any money on this deal.
So I really have a hard time that on our books, an asset that we own solely is in our books as at acquisition, because we may want to sell it to pay off debt, to do roads because we don't want to manage it anymore. And so it is an asset. So I think, we're also charged with governance for overseeing the town's financial reporting. And I believe that's part of us, that's council. So I really think we need to put our assets into our audit here.
I'll be your huckleberry. And not only will I audit this transaction of Enwin purchasing ELK, but I'm gonna show you all where the smoking guns lie. They tried to bury it in the fine print. They tried to hide it where nobody would look, but I found them. And I'm gonna show you all that this was a betrayal from the beginning of the new term, that the ELK board had no intention of running it. It's been prepped to sell the whole way. And they took the money where they could get it, and they added on debt where they could, and they made it look bad for the regulators. But we see through their lies, and I'm gonna show you where. Now, I want to apologize to Wayne Miller. Wayne, when we did that interview, I was wrong. The OEB did not issue a decision to sell. They were not on the company to liquidate or amalgamate or sell. In fact, the OEB made clear recommendations on how to return to profitability, and their recommendations were ignored. This was a choice the whole way, from Mayor Sherry, her town council, and the board of ELK to sell. And it's not right. It's a betrayal of every taxpayer in the town of Essex and every ratepayer of ELK, and I'm gonna prove it. Now, if you want to play along at home and do this as well, what you do is you go to the oeb.ca. These are the energy regulators for every utility across Ontario. You click the search and you go to Advanced Document Search. This is where they tried to hide it, because there's no files related to the transaction in ELK. There's no files related to the transaction in Enwin. You have to go to the Enwin parent company, Windsor Canada Utilities Limited. That's where they did all the dirty work. Search by the case number EB hyphen 2025-0172. Any matches, search that. And you get all these documents related to the purchase and sale. You get all these documents, and they try to bury you with paperwork. But I've combed through them all. Hundreds of pages. Let me show you the ones that are important. WCUL reply argument. This one has the guns.
But I know I don't agree with it. Never was the plan. We had
Yeah, the plan was never to sell to Windsor.
no, it was never to sell to Windsor, because you can't trust Windsor. Never been able to trust Windsor.
What we're gonna do is cruise down to number 10, paragraph 10. Back in 2023-0013, we're gonna find this exact document and cross-reference, okay? But this is what they're saying. The OEB encourages ELK Energy's management and board of directors to thoroughly examine all strategic options for the utility, including an early rebasing, emphasis added. If you're having a hard time struggling to generate profit, simply raise your rates and everything's going to be fine. I'll show you in a moment. ELK's rates were the lowest in the province. Hands down, bar none, we had the lowest rates in the province. Which, when you couple that with the flippant spending, the ice storms, the thunderstorms, bringing in contractors, firing people, hiring people, maintenance, replacing hydro poles, catching up on 20 years worth of maintenance. Oh my gosh, we gotta buy new trucks, we gotta buy new insulators, we gotta buy new switches. All this was done in a 2-year time period. All these costs were added on in a really brief period of time for legitimately no reason, because the flickers were not our fault. It was Hydro One's fault. Look right here. The regulators are telling you, just raise your rates and everything's going to be fine. Let's cross-reference this now. Well, all right. Here we are with EB 2023-0013. Now, this document is one of the last in a long chain which started way back 2023, and it was basically had to do with their submissions for the ice storm and the thunderstorm reimbursements and whatnot. But down here, if we go to page 21, we'll find that quote. Here it is here. And it's true, Enwin was the ones that emphasized this part, and they may have emphasized it to take away from, you know, the fact that we had options to keep going as a going concern, including raising rates. Now, truth be told, this document here was released March 21st, 2024 is when ELK came into possession of it. Now, the trouble here is that instead of acting on this recommendation from the OEB, the board had other ideas, and literally just about 30 days later, this happened.
You can make a decision today on the remuneration, or you could revoke your requirement to have that come to you for a decision. So that's up to council.
That's right. Instead of taking the OEB's advice, the board instead chose to give themselves approximately 300% raise. Shows where their priorities are. Now, what else was happening at that time? We can check the CAO report from that presentation to council. Head down to page 4, and there's a nice little timeline that shows exactly what they were thinking and why they were doing what they were doing. You can see in 2021, ELK contracted with KPMG to do a draft dividend strategy. And yes, if I pause right now to look over at the dividend section, you can see they sure made sure to pay dividends at that time. All right, and we can see that in 2022, there was a strategic review accomplished and presented to council. Well, they didn't act on it because there was an election coming up. And this probably arose out of that valuation request notice of motion from Councillor Bondy. We cruise down here, a little interim, and then wham, we're hit with the decision. December 5th, 2023, council engages Grant Thornton for an RFP seeking a merger or sale of ELK. They knew way back in December 2023 that we're hiring consultants to sell the company. Now, why would you go out of your way to give yourselves a raise, pay all these dividends, and later we'll see take on debt because we're already in the process of selling the company? All those things were made to extract money and make it look bad. And so it's no surprise that all those red flags showed up and all those monies were invested and spent because they knew they were going to sell. And they didn't care about the achieving a higher valuation. We want this much. On November 13th, 2024, submissions were received and Enwin was selected as the successful proponent. This was already baked into the cake. This decision was done way ahead of time. And now, from this point forward, it's on Enwin to show the regulators that this is a good decision. That we need ELK and all their future revenues, and we're going to show you why this is good. But this is not good. And just to further clarify, because something else came up in the past couple of days, let's look at another timeline of sorts. October 14th, 2020. Digging into the Facebook timeline. Sherry Bondy speaking with Brandon Chartier. On another note, I would love Essex Power Lines to take over ELK. Sherry, let's start that conversation. And one thing leads into another, which leads into...
But I think at this point, council needs to look at how we appoint the board of directors for our owned utility company. We need to look for that skill set, that expertise in this sector, and say, you know, do we have a plan? Is succession planning in the works? Can we have board limits? For example, you know, the former Essex mayor, how long are these board members there? And can we bring in some fresh voices and really open up the books?
So you mean to tell me all that huffing and puffing about having a skills-based board was nothing more than having a guy from Essex Power Lines and a guy from Enwin, and shortly thereafter you hired Integris? Those are the three possible utilities in our area that could buy ELK, and you brought them in, and you opened up the books, and you showed them exactly what we got, exactly what we're working with, so they could bid the lowest amount possible, and so that they know they're not in competition with each other, which is exactly kind of what Councillor Bjorkman was getting at here.
Again, that's one of those things, though, I'd be pretty keen on keeping it to ourselves. It would be a closed meeting item, because that day you do want to sell, you don't want to do people's work for them.
So heading back to that reply argument from Enwin's parent company, and we cruise down to paragraph 12, and this is the icing that tops the cake. Windsor Canada Utilities Limited does not agree with VECC's or SEC's characterization that ELK Energy appears to be in solid financial condition. And let's go cross-reference these things. Enwin tries their best to say, look, they did poorly in these years. They did poorly because the board managed it so poorly. We need to take them on because they'll have serious financial losses. But VECC and SEC, they clearly state we're in solid financial condition. Let's explore that. There are 3 organizations which work to have energy consumers back, to make sure everything's above board. The first is the Ontario Energy Board. The second, VECC, the Vulnerable Energy Consumers Coalition. And the third, SEC, the School Energy Coalition. And their counsel is this law firm right here. Now, let's dive into their articles to see what issues they had with NWIN purchasing ELK. Page 2 and page 3. ELK is losing money largely because its general and administrative costs skyrocketed in 2023. Part of this is the fact that substantial work was outsourced to Integris and to a third-party billing company. The latter was reversed in 2024. The loss does not appear to be as bad in 2024, but it is still a loss. The real reason, however, appears to be that ELK has the lowest distribution revenue per customer of all LDCs in the province, $22 per customer. The distribution revenue per customer is the peers are twice that. Something has to change. An acquisition could be that change, but we could also just raise rates. Page 5, financial viability. Despite ELK's recent financial performance, both utilities appear to be in solid financial condition. ELK, even after losses, is still in good shape with a shareholders' equity in excess of $10 million. Despite its losses in these financial statements audited by KPMG, they do not have any doubt expressed about the going concern assumption. We don't have to sell. We're strong.
They did take away my money, and that's okay because there's a means to an end. And if it improves our reliability of our distribution system, I'm all for it, right? I don't do this job for the money.
Yeah, almost forgot. He gave me 1,000. I think his idea was that I kill you. But you know the pity is when I'm paid, I always follow my job through. You know that. No! Angel Iron!
Essex-owned ELK Energy is being sold to Windsor's NWIN Utilities, now that the Ontario Energy Board approved Phase 1 of the sale. The town of Essex first announced plan to sell all of its shares back in March. The OEB says the $22.5 million deal will happen in 2 stages, starting first with the transfer of shares, while both companies continue to operate separately and set their own rates. A full merger isn't expected until 2028.
Find it interesting that CTV reports the full merger won't happen until 2028? I'll show you why. This is from the Vulnerable Energy Consumers Coalition, VECC's report on the amalgamation. And they say in paragraph 10, on the face of it, amalgamation between the 2 utilities would not meet the no harm test, as evidenced by a comparison of the rates. Now, what they're saying is you can't merge these utilities because the rates are so different. ELK had the lowest rates in the province. NWIN is 50% higher. How are they going to, by 2028, make it so that the regulators will pass the no harm test? We all know the answer to that. In the SEC section of the no harm test, third paragraph down, SEC notes that the application does contain some cost comparisons on preliminary basis. They're assuming a rate increase of exactly 35% in 2027 and another 20% in 2032 for ELK. They're unusually precise numbers. The applicants, meaning NWIN, did not have a response but referred to another rate increase which does not have the answer requested. It appears clear to us that these numbers are not a forecast but a plugged figure for illustrative purposes. Because the plan is to jack the rate. It's exactly what Councillor Vanderdolen tried to warn everybody about, passing that notice of motion.
Yes, I once again, I think taxpayers may want to be suspicious of the motives here. I've heard somebody say at least 15 times, maybe we want to sell it, maybe we want to sell it. Well, then maybe you should ask council if we want to sell it. But getting the value first, it's putting the cart before the horse. And I just want to point out to the ratepayers of ELK that if ELK is sold, the rates will go up sharply, because when you sell it, the buyers will have to recoup the cost of that company on the backs of the ratepayers, the customers of ELK. If you really want to entertain, oh, let's raise all the rates on our townspeople, then yeah, let's rush ahead with this. But I think this isn't a good idea.
Now, there are two more things to look at, and they're intertwined. So, we're moving to the end of this. This right here is the purchase price NWIN is going to pay for ELK. And it's a big formula based on 1.6 times the closing rate base. Okay? But there's more to it than that, because the OEB and all their other purchases that we're going to look in this footnote of 20, here it is here, they're constantly looking at the net book value of the utility in order to weigh how much investment is going into things. They're looking at net book value in terms of property, plant, and equipment per customer. All these calculations are derived from net book value. And if that sounds familiar to you, it's because just about everybody on this file agrees that the net book value of ELK is improper, which means the sale price is improper, and the decisions that came out of this chart are improper. SEC submission page 2, and they're looking at pre-COVID years to recent years to show that ELK had the lowest net book value, property, plant, and equipment per customer, basically out of all comparable utilities. And they forced them in this ruling to bring that number up. And so in 5 years' time, they did. They spent about $6 million to bring up their net book value, property, plant, and equipment to be comparable to everybody else. And what I'm saying is this is entirely flawed. Let's go to the interviews.
No, we paid for somebody else's shares. We had our own shares already. They have a value. The shares we bought were valued at 12.8. What was our value at that time?
However, the point of contention is they didn't place any value on their own shares.
Yeah.
The 38% that Essex owned already as part of the company.
Yeah.
And so, in your opinion, shouldn't that be factored into the valuation?
Yeah. So if let's say the Kingsville Lakeshore shares were worth 11 million, then our share was worth, say, 7.
Yes.
So it was worth 18 million.
Yes.
So I really have a hard time that on our books, an asset that we own solely is in our books as at acquisition, because
year 2000, Essex, okay, had 38% of ELK, and they bought the Lakeshore 24% and the Kingsville 38% for $12.8 million. And so that was the book value of the purchase on our books at the town. And that's all that they've had on paper for all this time. But what Councillor Hammond is saying is that's incorrect. You needed to make like a mark-to-market type adjustment to reflect the 38% already owned by Essex. And so the quick way to do this is to just take the purchase price and divide that by the percentage that was acquired. And now this is the total value of the company at that time, which is, like he said, about $20 million.
You filthy double-crossing bastard! Of all the stinking dirty tricks!
Way back to town is only 70 miles. You know, if you save your breath, I feel a man like you could manage it. Adios.
You filthy bastard! Come here! Come here! Cut this rope off! Get off that horse! Get off that horse! You filthy cunt! If I ever catch you, Blondie, I'll rip your heart out and eat it! I'll skin you alive! I'll hang you up by your thumb! You pig! You vulture! I'll kill you! I'll kill you!
Such ingratitude after all the times I've saved your life.
Wait a minute. This is only a trick. You wouldn't leave me here. Come back. Wait, Blondie! Listen, Blondie! Hijo de una gran puta!
But I want to say, like, I respect my elders, and when an older person is talking about history, you're either going to learn something or there's going to be a joke.
Back in the day, every town, every municipality had their own hydro company. 2000, Essex, Leamington, and Lakeshore decided to combine their efforts rather than get gobbled up by bigger electric companies.
So let's look at this from a historical perspective. You got 3 municipalities, they're all over 100 years old, and the electrical infrastructure is been around just as long. Now, how they come up with determination of Essex gets 38%, Kingsville gets 38%, Lakeshore gets 24%, who knows? This was back in the olden times, and to my knowledge, it was probably not based on property, plant, equipment contributions. It was probably based on population or size of your municipality. So, you know, there are limitations when it comes to accounting. But the idea is that you try to account for something as best as possible. And that is not what happened here. There was a flaw that nobody has pointed out until just this moment. And to my liking, I would have liked to see the entry for book value at that price we purchased. Was it $12,800,000? And because that was the cold hard cash used by ELK to purchase the partner shares. That makes sense. I would have liked to see a second line item just under that entitled something along the lines of in-kind contributions. Contributions to the partnership, which would have properly valued your 38% and come to some figure in and around $8 million. The fact that $8 million was left off ELK's books for all this time had huge ramifications. Let's go over it. Alright, I'm here with that chart, that really important chart where the regulators base their decisions off of net book value. Now, what if our net book value was not $9,400,000? And let's use our calculator to do this. But it's more than that. Now, this number is lower than the $12,800,000 because over the last 18 years, there has been other additions into book value based on what we've bought. There has been some subtractions because of amortization depreciation. So we're going to do a rough estimate and say that $8 million contribution at the beginning was depreciated by about 30%, 35%, something like that. Let's just add in another, let's add in $5,500,000. Very reasonable number. Okay, we'll say $15 million. If our book value is at $15 million at this point, divide that by the number of customers we have. Now, all of a sudden, this number would show 1,202. Okay, and we would be higher than the Ottawa River, we'd be higher than Wasaga area, and in line with our peers. As such, the Ontario Energy Board would not have issued this settlement saying, hey, you got to improve your PPE per customer and start spending and making better infrastructure. If that was the case, Councillor Bondy would not have thrown a fit in 2020, 2021, trying to get everybody to get a valuation and sell the company. So much ramifications come from this. Come from the fact that the book value was wrong. And now, let's look at the purchase price. Alright, so here's the purchase price and all that. And so what we're going to do is get the exact figures that they're using. So we're going to type in a purchase price, $22,500,000. And we're going to divide that by 1.6, the multiple that they tell us is really close to. So basically they're valuing our book value at about $14 million. Okay, now it could be something to do with this and how in the most current information we're closer to this, but I digress. Those are the numbers that they're using. And so what we're gonna do now is basically add on our depreciated amount from 18 years ago, a reasonable $5,500,000. That takes us to 19.5 book value multiplied by their 1.6 figure, and the purchase price should be $31,300,000. Basically, our ELK board gave Enwin $10 million in free equity. So I say we never let this board forget what they did, and also we go after our money. We go to Enwin and we say we want $10 million extra, or we're taking back ELK.